My business partner texted me at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Don't go looking through the accounts. You won't like what you find, and it'll only cause problems between us. I didn't say anything back. I put the phone down. I almost smiled, but didn't show it. 3 words came to my mind. Too late, Marcus. 6 days later, he was sitting at table 9 at Carmine's, my restaurant. The place I took every important meeting of my adult life. Eating a $400 dinner with people I had never seen before. Charging it to a card I didn't know existed. He thought I was home, unaware, still trusting him. The real game started that night. I am 38 years old. I ran a mid-sized logistics consulting firm that Marcus and I built from a shared desk in a WeWork in 2017. We met at a conference, shook hands over bad coffee, and decided 3 days later to go into business together. For 6 years, I treated that partnership like a marriage. I gave it everything. I protected it. I made sacrifices for it that I never fully accounted out loud. Marcus was the face. I was the engine. That was the arrangement. That was the imbalance I quietly accepted for longer than I should have. I told myself that every partnership has a division of labor, that his relationships brought in the clients that my systems retained. I was wrong. What I had actually done was build something that only worked because I was inside it, and then given someone else the keys. I found the first discrepancy on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I wasn't even looking for it. I was reconciling vendor invoices for Q3 and I noticed a payment to a company called Veltrix Solutions, LLC, $47,500, wired 6 weeks prior. I didn't recognize the name. I pulled the contract folder. Nothing. I checked the client account it was coded to. The client had never heard of Veltrix Solutions. I sat with that for exactly 4 minutes. Then I opened the full ledger. I didn't gasp. I didn't stand up. I didn't call anyone. I opened a new spreadsheet on a separate laptop, personal, not company issued, and I started copying numbers. What I found over the next 9 hours was not an accident. It was not a bookkeeping error. It was a construction. Marcus had created 4 shell vendor accounts over a period of 22 months. Each one had a legitimate sounding name. Each one had a real bank account attached to it. Each one had received payments that were coded to active client projects as operational expenses. The amounts were never large enough to trigger our internal review threshold individually. 30,000 here, 22,000 there, 47,500, 60,000 on a single invoice that had been backdated by 11 days. When I added the final column, the number sat there without drama. $340,000. Rounded down. I closed the spreadsheet. I saved it to an encrypted drive I bought at a pharmacy on my way home. I did not call Marcus. I did not call our accountant. I did not call a friend. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 11 minutes, and I made one decision. I was going to let him keep going. For now. Because the moment Marcus knew I knew, the money would move, the accounts would close, the stories would start, and I would spend the next 3 years in litigation, trying to prove something that I had already proven to myself in 9 hours. I had seen it happen to other people. I was not going to be other people. So I went home, made dinner, and sent Marcus a completely normal message about a client call we had scheduled for Thursday. He responded with a thumbs up emoji within 4 minutes. He had no idea. I gave myself one rule. I would not move until I had everything. Not most of it. Everything. The first call I made the next morning was not to a lawyer. It was to a forensic accountant named Patricia, who had been recommended to me 2 years earlier by a colleague who had gone through a messy business dissolution. I had kept her card. I did not know then why I kept it. I know now. Patricia did not ask me many questions on the first call. She asked me 3. How long had the relationship been active? Did I have access to all financial records? Was I still actively operating the business? Yes to all 3. She told me to send her what I had. She told me not to discuss this with anyone connected to the business. She told me to continue behaving normally. Those were her exact words. Continue behaving normally. I wrote them on a notepad and taped it to the inside of my closet door. For the next 6 months, I continued behaving normally. I showed up to every meeting. I laughed at Marcus's jokes. I forwarded him client emails and CC'd him on proposals and asked his opinion on hiring decisions. I sat across from him at lunch, twice a month at the same Italian place on 5th and I ordered the same thing I always ordered and I listened to him talk. I watched his face. I studied the specific rhythm of how a person speaks. When they believe they are completely safe, Marcus had a particular way of leaning back in his chair when he was comfortable. A specific tilt. I noticed it every time. He leaned back a lot during those 6 months. Meanwhile, Patricia was building something he would never see coming. She found the 4 shell companies within the first 3 weeks. Then she found a 5th one I had missed, smaller, older, used only twice, but connected to a transaction. That had tax implications, far beyond simple embezzlement. She found that 2 of the shell accounts had received payments that were then partially routed to a personal LLC Marcus had formed. 18 months into our partnership, that LLC had no public filing connected to our firm. It had, however, received $91,000 in the last calendar year. She found that one of the backdated invoices had been created using a vendor template from our own internal drive, which meant Marcus had accessed company systems to fabricate documentation. That detail mattered. That detail moved the case from civil to potentially criminal. I did not feel triumphant when she told me this. I felt tired in a way I don't have full words for yet. At week 11, I brought in a lawyer. His name is not important. What is important is that he had spent 16 years doing commercial litigation and fraud recovery, and he had the specific kind of quiet energy that people have when they have seen the worst of what business partners do to each other and have stopped being surprised by any of it. He reviewed Patricia's findings over 4 days. Then he told me the following. We had enough for a civil suit with strong recovery prospects. Potential grounds for a criminal referral, depending on the jurisdiction's appetite. And the part that required the most patience, the ability to remove Marcus from the business, entirely without triggering the partnership buyout clause in our original agreement, because the clause contained a fraud exception that Marcus had agreed to in 2018 and had almost certainly forgotten about. He had negotiated that clause out of a standard template. He had signed it without a red line. I remembered that meeting. Marcus had been in a hurry. He had a dinner. He initialed the pages fast. I had read every word. I always read every word. I chose the date myself. February 14th. Not for symbolism, because that was the date our quarterly tax filing was due, which meant Marcus would be at his desk, engaged, reachable, and completely absorbed in the ordinary machinery of the business. It was the last ordinary day he would have for a very long time. At 9 a.m., my lawyer sent a letter to Marcus's personal email and his registered business address simultaneously. The letter informed him that he was being removed from operational control of the firm effective immediately, pursuant to Section 11C of our partnership agreement, the fraud exception, and that all company accounts, systems, and communications infrastructure would be transferred to sole control pending legal proceedings. At 9:04 a.m., I changed every company password. At 9:07 a.m., I called our bank and removed Marcus as an authorized signatory. I had pre-submitted the paperwork 11 days earlier. The bank had flagged it for standard review. I had followed up every 2 days. It processed that morning without delay. At 9:11 a.m., our IT contractor, who I had briefed 3 days prior under a confidentiality agreement, remotely revoked Marcus's access to every company system, email, project management, file storage, client database, billing software. Every door closed in the same 4-minute window. At 9:15 a.m., I sent our 6 active clients a brief, professional email. It informed them that the firm was undergoing a management transition, that all existing contracts and deliverables remained fully intact, that their points of contact going forward would be me and our senior project manager, and that any questions could be directed to me personally. I had written that email 11 times over 3 weeks. The final version was 4 sentences. I did not mention Marcus by name. At 9:22 a.m., Marcus called me. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:23. Again, at 9:25. He sent a text at 9:26 that said, "What is happening right now? Call me immediately." He sent another at 9:29 that said, "This is insane, I don't know what you think you found, but you are making a massive mistake." He sent one at 9:34. That was longer. I did not read it in full. I screenshotted it and sent it to my lawyer. My lawyer responded, "Good. Don't reply to anything." I didn't. Marcus arrived at the office at 10:40 a.m. I know because the building has keycard logs and his access had been suspended at 9:07. He stood at the front door for a period of time that the log recorded as 14 minutes. I was not there. I was at a coffee shop 4 blocks away, working through a client deliverable. That was due by noon. I finished it. I sent it. I ordered a second coffee. He retained a lawyer by the end of that week. I know because my lawyer received the call on Friday afternoon. The position his lawyer initially took was that the removals were procedurally improper, and that Marcus intended to contest the fraud exception clause on the grounds that the alleged misconduct had not been formally adjudicated. My lawyer's response was a 47-page document that Patricia had prepared over the prior 8 weeks. It contained every transaction, every shell company registration, every backdated invoice, every routing record, and a timeline that was precise to the day. Marcus's lawyer called back in 48 hours. The tone was different. There was a period, about 3 weeks, where Marcus tried a different approach. He reached out to 2 of our mutual contacts in the industry and told a version of events in which he was the victim of a hostile and legally questionable removal by a paranoid partner. I heard about both conversations within 4 days. One of those contacts called me directly. I thanked him for letting me know. I sent him 2 pages of the financial summary, nothing privileged, just the core numbers, and told him he was free to form his own conclusion. He never spoke to Marcus about it again, as far as I know. The second contact went quiet entirely. I did not chase either of them. What I had was more persuasive than anything I could say out loud. Marcus showed up at my home on a Saturday morning in March. I saw him on the doorbell camera. I did not open the door. I watched him stand on my front step for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. He knocked twice. He looked at the camera once. Then he left. I sent the footage to my lawyer the same day with a 1-line note for the file. The settlement conversation began in April. I will not detail every exchange. What I will say is this: the negotiation was not emotional. It was mathematical. Patricia had a number. My lawyer had a structure. Marcus's side had a counter that was not serious. Then it became serious. Then it became a conversation about what Marcus most wanted to avoid. The answer was not financial ruin. The answer was criminal referral. The moment that option was placed clearly on the table, not as a threat, simply as a factual next step, that was available to us, the conversation changed character entirely. We reached a settlement in late April. Marcus agreed to repay $310,000 on a structured schedule, signed over his equity stake in the firm to me at a valuation that was considerably below market, surrendered any claim to intellectual property developed during the partnership, and signed a non-disparagement agreement that was mutual. In exchange, we did not pursue criminal referral. My lawyer's view was that recovery was the practical priority and that criminal proceedings, while available, were slow and uncertain. I agreed, not because I forgave Marcus, because I had a business to run and I was not willing to spend another 18 months of my life in depositions when the outcome I needed was already on the table. The last document was signed on a Wednesday. I was in my office. Marcus was with his lawyer somewhere across town. The signature came through electronically at 2:17 p.m. My lawyer sent me a 1-line message, done. I closed the email and went back to what I was working on. That night, I went to Carmine's. Table 9 was occupied. I sat at the bar instead. I ordered what I always order. I stayed for 1 hour. I did not think about Marcus in any sustained way. What I thought about for a while was the version of that partnership I had believed in at the beginning, the late nights building out our first client pitch, the specific feeling of signing our first 6-figure contract, the way Marcus had shaken my hand that first day and said, without any apparent irony, "I think we're going to build something real." I had believed him. For a long time, I had believed him completely. What I missed was not Marcus. What I missed was the version of that story where he turned out to be who I thought he was. That story was never real. I understand that now. The grief of it is not dramatic. It is quiet and practical, and it sits in the background of ordinary days without announcing itself. I have made peace with the fact that I will carry some version of it for a while. That is not weakness. That is the cost of having trusted someone completely. And the cost is fair, and I paid it. And I am still here. The business is intact. The client stayed. We brought on a new operational partner in May, someone I had known for 4 years. Someone whose financial history I reviewed before the first real conversation. Someone who signed an updated partnership agreement that my lawyer spent 3 weeks improving. The fraud exception clause is now 2 pages long. Marcus is still out there. I don't know exactly what he's doing. I don't track it. The settlement payments have come in on schedule so far. If they stop, there is a mechanism for that. My lawyer handles it. I don't think about it on most days. What I think about, when I think about any of this at all, is the thing Marcus said in that very first text. You won't like what you find. He was right about that. He was completely right. I didn't like what I found. But what he misunderstood, what people like Marcus almost always misunderstand, is that not liking something and being stopped by it are two entirely different things. I found it anyway. I always was going to find it. Some people operate on the assumption that the people around them are paying less attention than they are. That assumption is the most expensive mistake a person can make. It is not paid all at once. It accumulates quietly, in the background, over months and years, in spreadsheets and keycard logs and 47-page financial summaries, until the day arrives when the full balance is due and the invoice has your name on it, and there is no negotiating the terms. Marcus had 6 years to understand who I was. He chose to see what he needed to see instead. That was his decision. The consequences were mine to design. Here is what I want you to sit with after this is over. I did everything right. I gathered the evidence. I built the case. I followed the law. I recovered most of the money. The business survived. By almost any measure, this story ends well for me. And still, if you asked me whether I feel like I won, I would have to be honest with you. Winning looks different from the inside than it does from the outside. What I actually feel is not triumph. It is something closer to a long exhale after holding your breath for longer than your body was designed to. It is the specific quiet that follows the end of something that should never have had to happen in the first place. So I leave you with the real question. Not whether what I did was justified, it was. Not whether Marcus deserved what followed. He did. The question is this: how many people in your life right now are operating on the assumption that you are not paying attention? How many arrangements are you accepting because the alternative feels like a confrontation you are not ready for? How many things do you already know, somewhere in the back of your mind, in that quiet place that speaks before your rationalizations do, that you are not yet ready to act on? The cost of watching and waiting is not comfort. The cost of not watching at all is everything. The difference between those two things is the only thing that separated me from Marcus in the end. He stopped paying attention. I never did.